Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program. This is a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of the Infinity series and founder of Engine Books. Let's see what we have today. Today we're talking to Jed MacKay, a storied author for Marvel Comics of all places. He has written 3 volumes of his ongoing series Black Cat, a spin-off of the popular Spider-Man franchise. He's also currently writing Taskmaster, a villain series focused on the villain from the upcoming Black Widow movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he's written short fiction for Dystopia from The Rock. Thank you for joining us, Jed.
Okay, we are on the line here with Jed MacKay. This is a very special episode of the Write Project podcast because it's not often that we get people as widely read or as widely circulated as Jed. He not only writes some prose, he wrote for Dystopia from The Rock with a wonderful short story with that, but he's mostly known for writing for Marvel Comics. He's written for Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, Spider-Verse, his ongoing series Black Cat, the spinoff of the Spider-Man character. He just started writing a book called Taskmaster, which is one of my fan favorite characters. I'm a huge Marvel head, so I'm going to drive you insane on this call, by the way. I got an upcoming issue, I believe, in Wolverine, Red, White, and Blood. Just all of this amazing stuff around you. Thank you for joining us, Jed.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, well, I want to talk about Taskmaster number 3. I'm looking at the cover on here, and I know that's not out yet. I love Taskmaster. That cover, that character looks a lot like Black Cat. It says White Fox. That looks a lot like Black Cat. Is this a clever nod to the fact that you're a Black Cat writer? What's on the go?
No, I have zero control over what the covers look like.
Okay. It's amazing. I love it.
Editor sends a job off to Valerio. Valerio draws it. It comes back, and yeah, it looks great.
It does. It looks amazing.
It's funny because you're not the first person to say, "Oh, he's going up against Black Cat." I'm like, well, first off, Black Cat doesn't have a tail. There's that. But also, secondly, it's in the solicits right there.
Yeah,
sure, but not the character.
That's fair.
But yeah, it's that is the White Fox, Amy Han.
Okay, excellent. I wanted to ask about the Taskmaster series, about what you're as much as you can tell me, like what you're doing with it, if you're excited about it, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, obviously you're going to say you're excited about it and stuff like that. But I also just like it's become like just because of the releases and the release schedule and stuff like that. I think everyone knows it's not a coincidence that the Taskmaster number 1 is coming out a month that we thought the Black Widow movie was going to come out, where he was going to be the villain. Dealing with like the COVID moves for like the big like media Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff like that. How's that been behind the scenes? Because it can't have been fun. You know what I mean?
Actually, it's been basically non-existent.
Okay, good.
Obviously the only reason Taskmaster as a series exists is because Taskmaster's popping up in the Black Widow movie, and that is why, of course, spoilers for Taskmaster number 1, but it's been out for a week. Black Widow is one of the antagonists in Taskmaster.
That makes sense.
When the editors came to me and said, "Hey, you got time to do this Taskmaster book?" I said, "Sure." I said, "Well, here's what we want: Taskmaster's framed up for the murder of Maria Hill. Black Widow's on his ass. Then he has to deal with a bunch of spies." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I can do that." And then from there, I take what they want and turn it into a book that I'm excited about and that we can work on. So yeah, and Taskmaster's been a really easy book for me to write. Something about the character I found just really sort of suits my style and suits my interests. Yeah. So Taskmaster number 1 was written almost a year and a half ago now. It was supposed to come out April 1st. That didn't happen. And then got rescheduled for November. Then the movie got bumped again. But I think at this point they're like, yeah, we just got to put this book out.
Yeah, that makes
Already,
sense.
all the ads in #1 are for books that came out months ago.
Yeah, yeah, and that's just the nature of the way it is, I guess. But that's interesting. That they. I mean, I guess now it's like we're not entirely sure when the movie's coming out, so let's not hold up the release schedule anymore and just, I don't know, maybe they'll push the trade, or maybe it'll be popular and he'll get another miniseries around that time, whenever it comes out. Who knows? Who
Yeah, I mean,
knows?
at the very least, they'll have a trade on the shelves to put out with Black Widow and Taskmaster in it. Whenever the movie comes out, if they don't finally bite that video on demand bullet.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Okay, fun stuff. Well, I'm really looking forward to the rest of the Taskmaster series and the your Black Cat series continuing in a new form. That's going to be super fun. I wanted to be selfish and talk to you about your short story, Jang Hu, from Dystopia from the Rock, which we were
All right.
really excited to have and to, bring about some prose from you and stuff like that. Can you tell me about what inspired that story and what led you to write it?
So obviously, yeah, I'm in a writing club with Ali House.
I sure
We've been
do.
in the same writing club for shit, 4 years, I guess. We haven't had a whole lot of meetings recently, as you might imagine.
I do.
But yeah, she would always, having had her books out through your publishing house there, through your brand.
Yep.
She would bring up when you would have open submissions for your anthologies. I thought, Dystopia from the Rock would be fun to do, just a real trash, cyberpunk kind of corporate mercenary story.
Yep.
I had thoughts about the sort of like dystopian future China. So it's set in the Tianjin Autonomous Zone, I think, and 'cause that's where I used to live when I lived in China for a year. I was working at a school there a few years back, and
That's so cool.
well, and the mall that the guy starts off. You got the old North Korean guy in the mall. It's called, I think I called it Epoch Mall, which that in actual Taida in Tianjin there was the Aeon Mall was there. So yeah, it's not a particularly introspective story. It doesn't really have a whole lot to say.
Okay.
It's just a lot of action and pizzazz, which it's just a lot of fun to write.
Okay. Yeah, no, it definitely was fun to read and to edit and all that stuff as well. It was great.
Glad you liked it.
Yeah, no, I should send Ellie House flowers for getting you involved in that, for talking us up. That is wonderful, wonderful stuff. Thank you, by the way. You also blurbed the Light Bulb for us, which is a book collection of her short fiction. She's a great writer.
Oh yeah, no, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of her stories over the years now.
Yeah, no, she's super cool, man. Yeah, when I grow up, I'd like to be more like Ali House, but sadly, I will never grow up. So here's
I
no
mean, we could all serve to be a bit more like her.
Yeah, I agree. Jed MacKay, do you prefer to write standalone stories, or like when you're plotting it out, is that how you prefer it, or do you like writing a series? As someone who's done a little bit of both.
I think the individual stories are always what's going to be most important. You can make a series by stringing together good individual moments, but vice versa, I find is a little more difficult. So, generally, if I'm planning a series, it's because I want to be able to hit specific individual moments or specific individual stories.
Okay.
So that's generally how I approach it.
How long were you a part-time writer before you became a full-time writer?
Well, basically forever. I mean, I've been a part-time writer, paid or unpaid, since I was a kid, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I quit my job. Well, quit my job, resigned my position teaching just about a year ago, actually, November of last year.
Congratulations.
It's been, thank you. The previous summer there, I was off school, and I had been still doing comic writing, but I'd been teaching as well and just kind of balancing it. But work had sort of ramped up to the point that previous summer, then I was like, well, this is probably not going to be feasible. So I told the school I would come back in sort of a part-time capacity until someone could be found to take my position. And so once November came around, that was just kind of it. They had found someone else to take my job, and then stuck around to writing full time.
If you could do something different in your youth, if you could go back in time and give yourself, your younger self, some advice to make you a better writer today, what would you do?
Probably read more broadly. I was pretty, especially as when I was much younger, I had a pretty narrow focus in what I read. I think perhaps having a broader range of things to read probably would have helped me out. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Makes sense. What is a word that you cannot spell? If this word shows up in one of your books, it means spell check spelled that word.
Necessary.
Yep, that'll do it. I think I have
Yeah.
trouble with that one as well.
Is there anything with where there's one set of letters that sounds like it should be a double, and there's another set that sounds like it should be but isn't?
Yep.
That's always going to cause me a problem. Necessary. It's one I can think of off the top of my head. I always spell sorcerer wrong every time,
Yep.
which is a drag given that most of my prose writing is genre fiction.
Absolutely. Restaurant, I cannot spell it. Period. Just even now, if you paid me $1 million, I would get it wrong. I don't know why.
Yeah, we just have these blind spots hardwired into our brains, I guess. Like, I should know how to spell necessary by now. I spelled it enough times. I 100% should know how to spell sorcerer. I've typed it hundreds of times. But
we're kind of spoiled by spell check,
just the way it is.
honestly, because we never have to actually delete it
Oh, yeah.
and retype it. You just,
Yeah, it'll take care of it.
Jed MacKay, what was the first book you ever read that you remember making you cry? Either happy crying or sad crying, whichever.
I honestly don't know. I don't know, maybe the Velveteen Rabbit, I guess.
Popular answer is Where the Red Fern Grows. I'm going to make an entire episode of writers who were traumatized by that book.
Oh, yeah. I would do it.
Do you read the reviews that people post of your books? And if so, how do you deal with good ones or bad ones?
I do read a lot of reviews, despite the fact that I know that I shouldn't.
Yep.
Generally, I mean, I've been very, very fortunate in that for the most part, my reviews have been more positive than negative.
Yeah, whereas, they
have. Negative reviews do really bum me out. I should be more inured to them than I am, but it's just not the way it works. But generally, with a negative review, I basically try to look at it to say, is this something that I think is helpful or valid? Is this criticism something that I agree with? And whether or not I am correct in that, if that thing is valid or invalid, it doesn't matter because I'm not going to engage with it. But it's just a matter of saying, okay, well, this is a valid point, and that's something I can learn from and take, to carry forward. Or no, I don't necessarily think that's a fair point, and therefore, I guess I just won't let it bother me.
For sure.
And again, this is all entirely internal. I think there's no poorer form than bitching and moaning publicly about a bad review or about a reviewer that you disagree with, because I think it's just very gauche. Yeah. Whereas you try to be a little more above that.
Yeah, for sure. What's interesting with your comic book writing, I mean, I've seen some negative reviews for Black Cat where it's clear from the review that the person reviewing it poorly didn't even like. One review was literally that they didn't like that all supporting characters got their own series, and that every superhero should just have one series that releases multiple times a month, like they did with Brand New Day, and was just basically one starring anything that wasn't the main Amazing Spider-Man title with the same review was an option.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of these cases, what are you going to do? I also feel like in the days before you had review aggregators that would be one place you can go and see all the reviews averaged. I feel like a bad review wouldn't be as much of a deal. Whereas now you're like, oh, I've almost got, it's almost rated at like a 9.5, except someone gave it a 6.
I feel
but again, ultimately, it doesn't really matter.
No,
the people who are buying the book are generally doing so not based on a good review, but or a poor review, but based on word of mouth by other people who like it.
And I'm assuming that, I mean, if like currently the first volume of Black Cat, Grand Theft Marvel, has 49. The trade paperback has 49 reviews on Amazon, and it's very positive. And for like a recent trade paperback, that's pretty good. I think it's got a 4.6 out of 5 average. It's very good. But like I assume that if those 50 people were the only people who bought the trade, Marvel wouldn't care that everyone loved it who read it. They would care nobody's reading it, and it would get canceled even though it had amazing reviews. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you had a hypothetical situation where you have a book that's terribly reviewed but is selling huge copies, I honestly don't know what would happen with it.
Yeah.
Because
usually if something's getting that widely read, it'll find its audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I've put it this way, I know of a lot more comics that are canceled for poor sales than for poor reviews.
Yeah. Jed MacKay, what's it like writing a main character that's a different demographic than you, and how do you do that? So usually I say that more broadly, like, oh, how do you write specific, like anytime you're writing whatever you identify as your demographic, how do you write something that's different than that? It's interesting to ask you because the main series you're writing is Black Cat. So how do you contend with that, right? Writing a character that's different demographic than you?
I mean, I think it's something that's tricky. There's been, I mean, especially in comic books, you're going to see some really poor representation of characters who are outside of, excuse me, the backgrounds of the writers, who, again, in mainstream superhero comics, generally are white, straight, white, cisgendered men.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that you really got to be aware of. But what I try to do, and whether or not I'm successful at it, it varies from time to time. But my best practice is just try to approach things, respectfully. Approach things where you're not trying to make a joke at the expense of something of women be shopping or some shit like that.
Yeah.
But as writers, we have imaginations, and with that imagination, you can try to put yourself in the shoes of a fully formed character. You can say, if I don't have this experience, and I'm not going to try to claim that I have this experience. I'm not going to try to claim that I can portray a realistic or valid, well, maybe not valid, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A portrayal of this experience, but I can try to do it in a way that is respectful and interesting to people. Because yeah, like writing about a glamorous lady thief it's something that's wildly outside of my perspective, but I try to do it in a way that I think people will like and people will connect with and people will find themselves able to relate to. And like I said, I don't claim to be successful at it 100%, but I feel like I've been hitting more than I've been missing on that book for the most part.
No, I agree. It's been really well done. I'm also inside that kind of demographic, so maybe I shouldn't be saying that. Maybe I don't know, but yeah, no. For me, subjectively, it's been more hits than misses. Do you do any research? This is the same question, but do you do any research? Not obviously you can't research the other sides of it, but I mean you could go out and just steal a bunch of stuff, so at least you know that side of it. I mean.
I mean, you should see my TV. It's fantastic.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Just to get into the mindscape of a thief.
I mean, no, like the research for that is obviously not real life research, but I mean, Felicia's not a real life thief. She's not stealing credit cards and ripping off scratchers from 7-Eleven. It's the research done is looking at thieves in media, because she's a media thief, right? She's a movie thief. She's a comic book thief. She
closer to Indiana Jones than she is to like a real life thief. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is like the Italian Job. It's like Ocean's 11. Stuff like that. The Saint, with Roger Moore, stuff like that, where it's not just about stealing something, but it's about stealing something in a way that's exciting and stylish and looking good while you're doing
The Saint is with Val Kilmer, not Roger Moore.
it. Please.
Sorry. Hard stance. Wonderful, wonderful. Jed MacKay, what would you do if you were not a writer?
If I wasn't a writer, I would probably just still be teaching. I liked being a teacher. I like working with kids, and I would teach English and social studies mainly, and they're both things that I like to get into. I like talking about. I like sharing it with people. I don't like marking and doing admin. That's not a lot of fun. But if I wasn't writing, I would still be teaching.
Jed MacKay, does being published change how you write?
To a certain extent. I don't think I would phrase it in that knowing that something will be published does change the way in which I write. The way I write, for instance, the short stories I used to put online is significantly different than how I would write a comic book that is going to be published by a major corporation. For instance, stories that I'm writing largely for myself, or again, that comes from my writing club when we would meet every month, and I would have to have a complete short story ready every month because that was the standard that I held myself to then. Okay. So perhaps the story would be weird or not good or experimental or just kind of a goof. When I knew my audience was those three other people in my writing club, and then maybe like the one other person who would read things when I put it online. I just kind of do whatever I wanted. I wasn't particularly bothered about a larger response or a larger audience. It was just more writing for the experience of it. Whereas when you're doing paid writing for a large publication, you do have to approach it differently. You have to think, well, how are people going to receive this? How is this going to be? How does this serve the greater story in a way that will keep people interested, but will not give away too much information, but will also not leave people feeling like they're cheated? There's just a lot more to bring into consideration writing for a larger audience than writing for oneself.
Okay. All right. Good answer.
Thank you.
Jed MacKay, what other authors are you friends with, and how do they make you a better writer?
Other authors I'm friends with, I have obviously like my writing club, Julia Clahane, Dan Roy, Alley House. That was honestly, I don't think I would have a professional writing career if I hadn't been part of that writing club. The reason for that is, as anyone who is not being paid to write can tell you, it's extremely easy. The easiest thing in the world actually is to not write. I'd always written as a kid, but there'd be great periods of time when I just wouldn't write anything. I'd always be thinking about something. About 10 years ago, I moved to Halifax to go to Mount St. Vincent to do my Bachelor of Education, so I could be a teacher. And there, we've been talking about young adult novels. I was like, well, I read one. I'm like, well, shit, this is easy. Like, I could write one of these, no problem. And so I started, planning. I'm like, I'm going to write a young adult novel, write a series. We'll see how it goes. It'd be a fun exercise. I think I talked about it for like 2 years. Yeah. Didn't write anything. And then a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for a while was like, oh, how's that novel going that you're talking about like a year ago? And I was like, oh, I'm still planning it. And then in my head, I'm like, shit, I'm still planning it. Like I haven't done anything. Yeah. Like it's very easy to shoot your mouth off and just talk about writing, but to actually do the writing, that's the trick. Yeah. So anyways, I sat down, I wrote that novel, never got published. That's fine. It was sort of more for the experience. But then it wasn't till we started our writing club that I had a monthly incentive to not just write something, but write something complete. So through that, just sort of I developed the work ethic, so such as it is, to turn out a completed story every month.
For sure.
And that was doing that while still working full time as a teacher. Yeah. So I think that our writing club is probably one of the most formative writing experiences that I've ever had, because it set into place that routine. It set into place that monthly goal, that deadline that needed to be hit.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I find that deadlines and enforceable deadlines, even if it's just self-imposed, it helps a lot. A lot.
Mhm. Yeah, and they are self-imposed, but also, I mean, I've set goals for myself many times and regularly fail to meet them. But when you know that this meeting is here, and if you have yourself that goal, like I need to show up as something complete, otherwise I won't get the feedback that I want,
Yeah.
then that kind of adds a greater level of accountability to it.
Are there any authors you can think of that you disliked their work at first, but when you read more of it, you grew to like it and even grew to like the stuff that you disliked before?
Definitely. I don't know. I mean, one of the sort of goofier answers is that I was never a fan of Shakespeare
Okay.
when I was younger. I studied at university. It didn't click for me, but it wasn't until later that I was teaching it in high school that it just kind of clicked for me. And yeah, I mean, I guess for one reason or another, it did not work for me when I was younger. And then when I was older, I was like, oh shit, now I get this. Like now I kind of, you know, it's like you're digging, and then eventually you hit that live wire, and then you can feel the electricity all of a sudden.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. Actually. Jed MacKay, do you believe in writer's block as a concept?
Um, I mean, I guess I feel like writer's block is something that's overly romanticized.
Yep.
Um, which is not to say, I've never experienced times where I've had difficulty writing something. But again, part of it is that working in comic books, you don't really have room for writer's block. You've got to crank something out to hit that deadline. Otherwise, the artist is waiting, and then they have less time to draw it. Um, so I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. I'm not going to say it's not, a terrible affliction. Like it's if you can't write something and you have to write something, it's awful. I've
Yep.
got various drafts of stories that I've started and never finished because I'm just like, I don't know what to do with this. Um, but ultimately, I feel like, and again, everyone's experience with it is going to be different. I guess I can't be too cavalier about that. But I think it's something that it's overcomable. It's something that's survivable. You may not be 100% happy with what you come out the other end of it with, but it certainly beats not having anything.
For sure. Absolutely. I agree on all points there. Yeah, no, for sure. Weird question. Very, very specific. But Jed MacKay, what are you reading right now? What is your reading book, novel, comic, whatever?
Right now, I have. All right. No, I finished that. I generally have my house from eBay, so it's kind of like whatever's coming out at the time. I just finished reading The Alienist by Caleb Carr.
Nice.
I'd read that I think when I was in high school and really liked it, so I thought I'd revisit it. Got the sequel to that actually just came, so working on that. And I just started rereading actually Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco, which I haven't read for 15 years, I think. It's been a long time. I think it was the first Eco that I've read back when I lived in Korea. And so I don't know. I have a habit of revisiting books a lot. I forget things very quickly.
Yep.
So I can pretty easily pick up a book and still be surprised by things I read like only 10 years ago.
I'm jealous of that. I have a weirdly specific knowledge for not for like lines, but for plot points. So I that whole like, ooh, you can read a book a second time, cannot really.
Yeah, and as far as comics go, I got the old Marvel used to publish the Essentials line, which is like a
I
black and
know them
white
well.
newsprint
Yep.
comic book.
Yep.
So yeah, I got the Essential Doctor Strange Volume 1. So I've been reading through this old like Ditko Doctor Stranges. They're great.
Nice. Do you ever want to just take like a coloring pencil to them and treat it like a coloring book?
Not with my sense of color now.
Okay, gotcha. Jed MacKay, have you ever Googled yourself?
That was a bit personal, isn't it? No,
All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.